All right, everyone, welcome back. So, we are looking at the playoff teams here in our season review series, and we're up to the Washington Capitals for the first team here. They're fascinating. You look at the team stats, the player stats, it's kind of fascinating that this team actually made the playoffs. Not gonna lie to you. When you look at the team numbers, it's very fascinating. So they went 40, 31, and 11 for 91 points. They were 17th in the NHL. Now, the Red Wings, who we talked about 2 videos ago, were actually tied with the Capitals in points, but the Washington Capitals had the tiebreaker of, I think, most regulation wins. So obviously that put the Capitals over the Red Wings, the Flyers, and the Penguins in that four-way battle that took place on like the second to last day of the season. So, something that definitely was interesting was definitely goal differential. That was one thing that a lot of people pointed out when they made the playoffs. They scored 220 goals. They let in 257 for a minus 37 difference. I believe that is the record for the worst goal differential of a team to make the playoffs. And I remember when Washington clinched, there were a lot of videos that were made either that night or the following day that were along the lines of, oh, were the Washington Capitals the worst playoff team ever? And it kind of put them in the same category as the New York Islanders this past year. I feel like they got hot at the right time and they pushed themselves into the playoffs. And I was like, we'll see if this is a fluke or not. Obviously, you can decide if it was or wasn't, but obviously their run in the playoff did not last that long. They had a 22-12-7 record at home, so this team was very good at home. They had a 18-19-4 record on the road, so the road record, again, was very middling. It definitely was not a great road record whatsoever. They had a 20.6 power play percentage, which is ranked 18th. Then they had a 79% penalty kill, which is ranked 19th. So 2 very average numbers there. Nothing to be really concerned about. They're a little bit below average, but they're still on, obviously good enough to make the playoffs. They scored 2.63 goals for per game, which was 28th. So the interesting thing about the Capitals is that they were, I think that's 5th worst when you look amongst, or I think it's 4th worst when you look amongst goals for per game. The thing is with the Capitals is they would win they would win or lose games in 2 ways. You'd either win a game whether it's like a close 1 goal, like a 3-2, 4-3, 2-1 win. That was how the Capitals won a lot of their games. I mentioned that a lot in videos about the Capitals this year on my channel. And then if they were losing, it'd be blowouts. Like they lose by like 3 or more goals. That was the consensus a lot this past season. So they were really good when it came to holding on to leads, but when they were getting blown out of the water, that's not something that they can obviously come back from. And they really didn't have that many like 2-goal games or anything like that whatsoever. They were swept in round 1 by the New York Rangers, the President's Trophy winners, 4-0. A lot of people expected that to happen. The Rangers were obviously the best team in the NHL, President's Trophy winners. There definitely will be a video on them in the future. But obviously, the Capitals definitely exceeded expectations this year by making the playoffs. Fascinating thing, too, is that they sold at the trade deadline, and they still made the playoffs. I feel like that is definitely good and shows that this team is in a good spot. And they have some decent draft capital over the next 2 or so seasons. So we'll see what they want to build here. Obviously, though, they already made a trade yesterday with Dubois and Kemper. I don't know if I'll bring that up too much this video because it's mainly just reviewing last season. But when you look at leading scorers, you got Dylan Strome first. Strome, 82 games played, 27 goals, 40 assists, 67 points. Strome's taken a big step for the Capitals these past couple of seasons, and he's become a legitimate number 1 center with guys like Backstrom and Kuznetsov either being injured or not playing up to the level that they used to. So Strome really established himself this year as a bona fide number 1 or number 2 center for sure. Alex Ovechkin, second in scoring. This guy struggled to score a lot this year, but really picked it up in the second half of the season. 79 games played, 31 goals, 34 assists, 65 points. What you're going to see a lot through the next 2 seasons is Ovechkin catching the goal record. He got 31 this year. I think he probably gets somewhere a little bit more, a little bit less than that this next year. So we would probably see him break the record maybe at the end of next season or the beginning of the following one. So we'll see what Ovechkin can accomplish next year. But obviously this year, a little bit of a disappointing year when it came to scoring in the first half. The second half was spectacular, though, by him. John Carlson, third in scoring, 82 games played, 10 goals, 42 assists, 52 points. Carlson was a guy who went through a lot of issues last season, looked a lot better this year, played a full season, which is obviously great to see. Still the Capitals' number one defenseman. I don't think that changes for the next couple of seasons either. Tom Wilson. Wilson always gets a lot of controversy. This year there was plenty of that. 74 games played, 18 goals, 17 assists, 35 points. Again, I mean, I could say what I want about Wilson. I don't agree with the amount of money he's being paid, but there will be fans that will defend that. I respect that. But obviously Wilson viewed as an enforcer, not going to score you a ton of points, but still is a guy who can come in and score you a good 20, 25 goal season. So I guess you can take that with what you will. Connor McMichael took a big step this past year for the Capitals. 80 games played, 18 goals, 15 assists, 33 points. McMichael played really well this year. I think that shows that he has a lot of potential moving forward, and he's going to be someone that I think is a part of this Capitals team for the foreseeable future, along with some of the many other young guys that are amongst this team. Which, by the way, the AHL affiliate of this team is in the Calder Cup Finals for the second straight year. So shows that this team has some solid young players down below that may come up into the NHL. A lot of them did this year, in fact, like Alexi Protas. Protas had 78 games played, 6 goals, 23 assists, 29 points. Protas, I think, had a good season for what you expected from him. He's not going to be someone at this stage in his career who scores you a 40, 50-point season. Maybe he can get to that point, but I would say a good 30-point season from a young guy like him is good numbers. TJ Oshie is where you get some concern. Oshie, 52 games played, 12 goals, 13 assists, 25 points. Now, here's the interesting thing. Backstrom, who I don't think played a lot this year, if at all, and Oshie both are been injury prone, have faced a lot of injuries the last couple of years, and have 1 year left on their contracts. So I think it's possible that next year is the last year we see those two players in Washington. I think starting then, they already moved Kuznetsov, which we'll get into in a little bit here. They obviously, I think they're probably going to let go of Oshie. They're probably going to let go of Backstrom next season. Maybe Backstrom might not even come back, so they might be able to do that anyways. But regardless, I think that starting next season, we're going to see a real change to the core that used to be that 2018 Cup team. So we'll see. But regardless, Oshie, I think, had as good of a season as he could have had with the amount of games he's missed. But yeah, Sonny Milano here is 8th in scoring. 49 games played, 15 goals, 8 assists, 23 points. Milano had a solid year. He's not going to score you a ton of goals or a ton of points, but he's a solid, third-line player. Max Pacioretty was interesting. 47 games played, 4 goals, 19 assists, 23 points this past year. Pacioretty was a guy who came in around the halfway mark of the season. He looked okay, I guess. I mean, there were some points where he looked solid. He actually was rumored to get moved to the deadline. Obviously did not. Played okay down the stretch, but I don't think he comes back. And then Rasmus Sandin, young defenseman, 68 games played, 3 goals, 20 assists, 23 points with the Capitals this past season. So, young defenseman, can definitely play well on that blue line. I think you keep him around for this blue line revamp that might happen here this offseason. But regardless, that's your offense. The weird thing is that, again, as I said, they struggled a lot to score this year, and there are teams that didn't make the playoffs in the East that were below them who had, way more better point totals than half these guys on this list. So, definitely something to keep in mind. Again, it's very fascinating that this team made the playoffs with the analytics you look at on paper. It's really fascinating, but regardless, they did this year. It didn't last long, but still, now you got to look to next season. But the goalies is our last thing here. Charlie Lindgren was the guy who kind of carried this team down the stretch, had some incredible games, shut out the Boston Bruins, held the Flyers to 1 goal in the last game. Like, this guy was unbelievable down the stretch. He went 25, 16, and 7 with a 2.67 goals against average and a .911 save percentage. So, great numbers there from Lindgren. He will be the starter next season. There's no doubt in my mind. I think we're going to see a Charlie Lindgren, Hunter Shepard tandem next year. I think Shepard, who's been playing a lot in the AHL for the Hershey Bears, I think he's finally going to get a chance to be the backup in the NHL. Darcy Kuemper, who was traded yesterday, but I'm still going to bring him up here. 13, 14, and 3, a 3.31, a .890. Those numbers, especially with the money he's being paid, it's good Washington got that off the books. The Dubois contract's a little bit concerned. It's a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but regardless, it's interesting. Hunter Shepard was then your other guy who had 2-1-1 record, a 3.19, and a .894. So good numbers there from a guy like Hunter Shepard, who is probably going to be the backup next season, as I mentioned. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of ins and outs, guys who came in, guys who left throughout the season, there were no guys who came in, just draft picks. A second, 2/3, a fourth, and a fifth. Guys who left, Anthony Mantha to Vegas. Edmondson, I think, went to Carolina? Probably wrong. Or Edmonton. Or Toronto. Toronto. He went to Toronto. Kuznetsov went to Carolina. So, obviously, they let go of some of their main core guys that had been there for a couple of years. Kuznetsov's been there for a very long time. Mantha's been there for, I think, 2 or 3 years since the Verana deal. And then Edmonton, I think, has been there for maybe 1 or 2 years as well. So they're starting to let go of some of the core players that were on this team for a while. And I think that's a trend we're going to see move into next season as well, for sure. So, again, that's it for the 23-24 season when you look at analytics and numbers. Let's get into basically what's for the future. Draft capital and free agency is what I cover. So you got draft capital here, a first-round pick, which I think is the 17th overall selection, a second, 2/3, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and they actually have no 7th in this year's draft. So decent capital. We'll see what prospects they get. They'll get someone all right at 17th overall. But again, as I've said in these videos, I feel like the prospect pool really falls off after the 13th or 14th pick. So we'll see who they get. UFAs and RFAs is an interesting one. Not a lot of people on this list. UFAs, Nicolas Aube-Kubel, and Max Pacioretty. I think Pacioretty goes. Kubel we'll see, but he hasn't really slotted himself in the lineup too much. We'll see where he fits in. RFAs, Beck Malliston, and Connor McMichael. McMichael, as I said, had a good season this past year. I think you definitely keep him around. He probably gets signed to a bridge deal. And then Malliston, we'll see if they keep him around. I imagine they probably will, but we'll find out. Regardless, that is your 2024 review for the Washington Capitals. I feel like next season is going to be really kind of an interesting year. I really have no idea what to expect from them next year. I don't think they will be terrible, but again, they're not going to be like a great team. Like, they're not going to finish top 3 next year. I don't think they will in that Metro division. But regardless, that is your 2024 review for the Washington Capitals. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy, make sure to like, subscribe down below. I really appreciate it. But anyways, next one I think is Tampa, and then we're going to do Winnipeg and the rest of the teams that lost early in the first round. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.